Into another edition of the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. Blaine Kellar, Chris Yow, Terry McCormick with you. Fox Sports' Ben Arthur will join us later on. But first, guys, a brief eulogy for the Tennessee Titans who fell to 3-10 after a 10-6 loss to the last place Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, the Titans now share last place with the Jaguars, and they also share something else with them in the fact that they are officially eliminated from the playoffs. Not that we thought they were going to go or anywhere reasonably close to that, but the formalities are over. This team can now start thinking about 2025 and what needs to be done to fix the mess that they're in.
Chris, is it fair to say the Titans are at their rock bottom for this season? 2 weeks ago, felt like things were trending in the right direction. Brian Callahan had his biggest win against Houston, and then they put up consecutive decisions against the Commanders and Jacksonville that were just kind of embarrassing.
Is it rock bottom? Well, I guess that depends on where you classify rock bottom. Here's the thing. I don't think it can get better, but I do think it could get worse. I really do. And the way it gets worse is ironically by winning. At this point, you got to hope they lose out. Seriously, I mean, beating Jacksonville last year cost this team an opportunity to get the number one left tackle in the draft. And J.C. Latham nearly got the quarterback killed again yesterday. So let's just hope they lose and 2025's draft is better. That's all I know.
We've reached that point of the Titans season. Terry, your thoughts on the Titans tankathon?
Well, I mean, I get where Chris is coming from, and most of the fans probably feel that way too. But inside the locker room, you've got guys who are playing for their football lives, and so they're not going to tank. Now, you might see, and I think you saw some of that yesterday. You might see some young guys. It's David Martin Robinson got his first action yesterday. Bryce Oliver had a bigger role. Mason Kinsey was out there. So they're starting to comb through some of these guys that have not played much this year. Some of it due to injury. Otis Reese is another good example, and some of it due to the fact that they need to see what they have so that they can start building for 2025 to see who fits and who doesn't going forward.
Yeah, the Titans, a lot of the players in the locker room said they're playing for themselves in these last 4 games. We'll touch on that a little bit in our next segment, as well as break down all that went wrong for Tennessee in a 10-6 loss to Jacksonville.
Do we have enough time?
Fox Sports' Ben Arthur joins us after the break.
Being a part of a cooperative is being a part of something bigger. Farm Credit Mid-America is a customer-owned lender that specializes in agricultural financing for farm real estate, operating, and farm equipment. A unique benefit of being a part of the Farm Credit Mid-America Cooperative is our patronage program, which has put over $1 billion back in our customers' hands over the last 7 years. That's the power of a cooperative. Visit us at fcma.com to learn more.
I own the land.
I farm the land. Together we're farmers. This is our cooperative.
Ben Arthur has a pulse on AFC South football for Fox Sports, has experience covering the Titans. He's been around for a while. He joins us now on the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. Ben, your takeaways from yesterday's game at Nissan Stadium?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. And yeah, everything you guys said, and I think Chris, before, going into the break, I mean, it depends on kind of where you want to start. I mean, this is a game the Titans absolutely should have won. Once again, we saw their execution, lack thereof, in kind of critical situations, just fall apart. I mean, the red zone stuff, the fourth down stuff. I mean, you look at Calvin Ridley's seemingly brain fart on that third down where he had, plenty of green in front of him, could have gotten that conversion, but just kind of spaced and and he didn't have anyone in front of him, right? So, I mean, it's just things like that, losing to a team you shouldn't have lost to. I mean, all that is kind of what we've seen from this Titans team all year. You know, there'll be some spurts of good, but way too much bad, and there's no sense of consistency on any side of the ball. So it's just kind of what this team is, right? So,
Man, I'm going to put you on the spot here right off the bat. How much of that do you think that this team is on the coaching staff in terms of not having this team consistently prepared? And how much of it is on the players who either just don't execute or this team is lacking the talent to compete with the top tier teams in the AFC and the NFL?
Yeah, well, I think honestly, I think the talent gap between teams isn't as large as sometimes we make it to be, just in terms of the NFL, right? Like there's a reason all these guys are here, right? But I think on the margins where you talk about third down, red zone, play calling in certain situations, execution here and there is where kind of great teams can really differentiate themselves. And that's why the Titans have looked so far behind other teams. I think they're bad on the margins, and to your kind of that first part of your question, Terry, I think it is a big part of it is on coaching. I mean, there's obviously a responsibility of the players because they're the ones out there who have to execute, do their job. But when we see, like kind of as I was saying earlier, when we've seen this poor execution in critical kind of situations throughout the season, it's a trend. Right, like a kind of a lack of fundamentals, so to speak, or I mean, maybe mainly in regards to special teams, but just kind of overall, just in critical situations, when you see that week after week after week, I think that definitely falls more on coaching, and I think we've clearly seen that Brian Callahan is. I mean, we've seen how green he is, right? Not just in that he's a first-year coach, but he's a first-year offensive play caller, right? And so kind of juggling those two things at once and learning how to be kind of a leader of men, so to speak, in terms of being being the head coach. I think we've seen, we've seen him have some struggles in that regard.
Well, Ben, I wanted to ask you a little bit. I was on record earlier in the season saying Brian Callahan was pretty creative when it came to his offensive sets in the red zone. Do you feel like he's getting a little maybe too pass happy in these situations with the Titans' red zone struggles? They're passing 65% of the time when they're inside the 20. When you have a back like Tony Pollard, does it just make sense to maybe just ride the running back in the way that they're doing outside of the 20s?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I do think there is something to that, Blaine. Yeah, I mean, Tony Pollard is someone, we talk about these inconsistencies they've had and specifically on offense, but I mean, he's been like the one guy who's been like consistent from the beginning of the year to now. I mean, he's a guy you can count on to get, like, it seems like at least 80 rushing yards every game. And you should lean on him in the red zone. And I think there definitely is something to that, maybe getting in your head a little too much at times. And, thinking about, okay, the defense is probably going to try to stop TP. Let's, maybe run some actions to fool them a bit, or let's try to get to Calvin or whatever it is. I do think there's legitimacy to that thought.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they should have run the ball more in the red zone. I'll throw another stat or two at you too, and kind of what I thought the Jaguars were able to do to them yesterday. One of the things, first of all, that the Jaguars seemingly wanted to do yesterday and did do, they knew going in that, the strength of the Titans offense had been when Will Levis has time to throw explosive plays. And they limited those explosive plays yesterday. There were very few throws that were down the field completions from Levis like we'd seen against Washington, against Houston, against Minnesota in the weeks leading up to yesterday's game. So kudos to the Jaguars for having a really good game plan there. And then the other thing is this. the part of Levis's game that's still not very polished right now. He's made strides in a lot of areas over the course of the last month or so. But it's the part is deep in the red zone is where he seems to struggle. Only 2 of his 12 touchdown passes this year have been from less than 10 yards. So, I don't know about you, but I feel more confident that Will Levis is going to throw a touchdown pass from the 40-yard line than the 4-yard line. And I think that, that's something he's going to have to work on if he wants to be this team's long-term answer at the quarterback position. And it's something that the receivers and Brian Callahan are going to have to help him with too, to scheme up more things that can get somebody open, because those are tight window throws, and those are throws that have to have the right timing.
Yeah, absolutely, Terry. You hit the nail on the money there. And yeah, the thing with the red zone too, everything you mentioned, kind of the need to kind of get some separation. There are going to be more tight window throws there. I mean, the space is so compressed once you get inside the 20, inside the 15, inside the 10, to where you have to really be on point there. Whereas if you're like at the 40, 45, you kind of have some more space to operate. Guys have time to get some separation. But in the red zone, you don't have that time anymore. And the ability to get separation is that ability is kind of reduced dramatically. And so you do have to be sharp in a way in the red zone that you don't in other areas of the field. And that's definitely something for as many strides as we've seen Will take over the last, month or so. That's an area that he's got to work on too.
Well, the Titans had it at the 2-yard line, the 9-yard line, couldn't convert either time. We've talked about the play calling a little bit and the decision-making down in the red zone, talked about Will Levis and his issues when they get deep down the field. Who do you put more of the blame on, Ben?
Oh, yeah, that's always tough. I mean, honestly, like I'm always like an advocate of kind of being aggressive when you're in those spots. Like when you have like a 4th down inside the 10, I mean, I'm an advocate for like kind of going for it. Like I think kind of kicking a field goal there is being maybe a little too conservative. But when you look at the Titans and their issues just getting points on the board in the first place, I mean, maybe Brian Callahan should have a better just kind of awareness of just where his team is, their difficulty kind of getting points, and maybe just take the points there and maybe hope that kind of gets your guys brings their confidence up a little bit, because they just struggle to score points at all. So maybe because of just what this team is, you just have to take the field goal in certain situations like that. But yeah, in terms of the blame, I mean, it kind of depends on the situation, right? I mean, sometimes the play call isn't good, sometimes the execution isn't good. There's always kind of a give and take there. But I would say just because of where this team is, I mean, maybe you put a little more on Brian Callahan and just like, you just got to get those points. I think that's kind of where I'd come on that.
Yeah. In hindsight, you take the 2 field goals in those situations and you're a 12-10 winner.
Yeah.
So, so you're feeling bad about the red zone coming off a win rather than feeling bad about the red zone coming off a loss and scoring 6 points. One thing too, and Ben, I know you may have gone to the Jaguars locker room, but one thing too that I kind of saw for the first time yesterday was frustration boiling over in the locker room, especially from some of the defensive guys who played a game that was good enough to win. 2 takeaways, holding the Jaguars to 10 points, and for some reason, with all the other problems, they couldn't get it done. Jeffrey Simmons was saying, how he's tired of seeing the quarterback getting hit and getting killed, laying on the ground. Darryl Baker told me that, hey, we played well enough, but you can't just score 6 points. You got to score more. So I wonder too if for the first time yesterday, a team that's clung together through all the trials and tribulations of a bad season maybe started to splinter just a little bit, maybe not permanently, but just in the heat of the moment frustration after yet another loss.
Yeah, I think that's something you have to look at, right? I mean, especially when like this has kind of been a season-long thing, right? And I know a lot of times I wasn't in the Titans in their locker room after Sunday's game, but when you kind of lose, I mean, each game is a little different, right? But when you kind of have like the same issues over and over again, like I've heard Jeff say a lot, like, I keep telling this to you guys. I keep telling this to you guys. Like, it seems like after every game, it's like the same script almost, because it does seem like, and again, like the defense isn't perfect, right? But they've done a lot of things to win you games, right? And it seems like whether it's offense or special teams or some combination of both, or play calling, whatever, they just find a way to kind of lose these games. And yeah, at a certain point, frustration has to boil over. I mean, because football is too hard of a game to keep losing like that. The way these guys put their body on the line each week. And so I think it's, yeah, I don't blame, you know, some of those guys for that frustration boiling over, because, you know, you just kind of get to the point of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, you know? Yeah. So
Give you one more here, Ben. With the defense kind of laying some of the blame on the offense on Sunday, and multiple offensive and defensive players I talked to saying these last 4 games we're playing for ourselves, playing for our own tape moving forward. How telling is that of the state of this locker room, of the state of maybe the state of this team, this organization going into the last month of the season?
Yeah, I think that naturally happens at this point, right? Especially like when you're out of the playoffs, right? There's nothing else to do. I mean, to expect these guys to just kind of lay over and to tank like what the team, what fans want. I mean, it's just not kind of realistic. These guys are people. They want to support their families and they want to put the best tape forward. And so when you're eliminated from the playoffs, it seems like those macro team goals are gone. I mean, what you have is yourself and what you do out there. So I don't kind of blame. I think that's a natural part of kind of a bad team, right? I don't think the way it's devolved for the Titans is any different from it is for any other bad team. But what I think is going to be really interesting is when we get to this offseason and start talking about like just Brian Callahan. And we know that he has kind of the safety net of being a first-year coach, but like at what point is it too bad to where you need to maybe look at possible changes, right? Like what growth have they actually shown, you know, throughout the year? And so I think that's going to become more and more of a topic point, especially coming off a loss like that to just an awful Jaguars team.
There was a blip of hope 2 weeks ago for the Titans and Brian Callahan. Now all of that seems to have gone away. Ben, thank you so much for joining us on the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast.
No problem. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks,
We'll
Ben.
come back with our stat stuffers and stock report. Stay tuned after this.
He shoots and he scores!
As was the case last week on the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast, there's not too many stock ups when you've got a 10-6 loss to the league's worst team. Terry, where does your stock
What was the
report
league's
lie?
worst team?
Yeah, was the league's worst team, Terry.
Let's just call this a stock market crash. I mean, that's about all you can say from yesterday. Nobody was good enough. I will give one thumbs up, though, to a stock up to linebacker Otis Reese, who was forced into action yesterday because of injuries to Jerome Baker and Kenneth Murray. I think he had 8 tackles, including 1 or 2 for loss, and also had his first career interception. So amid the lost performance yesterday by the Titans in just a terrible outing all the way around against Jacksonville, Otis Reese stood out as a guy who made a few things happen in a good way.
Yeah, Otis Reese gets a thumbs up, not a stock up yesterday. I give it down all across the board offensively. Defensively, I'm not sure you could have expected the Titans to get much worse than what they've kind of been offensively going before the Houston game. Really just a team deadlocked at 17 to 21 points. Yesterday, you can't even get 1 touchdown. You fail in the red zone twice. All you can get is 2 field goals. Lots of credit to the defense for pitching a 3-quarter shutout. But Jacksonville really moved the ball with ease in that 4th quarter. Even with a backup quarterback in Mac Jones, it felt like every check down that they wanted, every sideline throw that they wanted was there. Not a good performance. They were shorthanded a little bit, but I did not feel good about any of it. Like you said, Terry, a stock market crash. Chris, what do you got?
I'm with you guys. There's just not a lot of good things to say there, and all of the bad things are clearly and obvious. But Blaine, specifically one of the things that you talked about there in that 4th quarter, after Will Levis missed a wide open Chigakonkwo for a touchdown, I don't know what he was doing. He was looking directly at him. I don't know how he missed Chig there in the end zone, but whatever. 3rd down, 9 or 10, maybe even 11. I think they lost a yard, and it was 3rd and 11, and Awuzie just leaves a guy wide open at the 10-yard line for an easy pitch and catch first down. I mean, that's just when you've done everything so well to that point and just give up 3rd and longs backed up to their 1-yard line when you have an opportunity to really, give yourself a chance there. It just feels like there's a disconnect somewhere. And to me, when there's a disconnect like that, it's pretty simple where it starts, and that's coaching. I think the defensive staff has done a pretty good job over for the season. I think yesterday, considering all of the new faces, I mean, Terry was tweeting out names that I've never heard in my life. Who are these people? I mean, he's over there with the Birmingham Stallions defense, as far as I knew, and yet they played really well. They played well enough to win. So my concern is these coaches are not preparing these guys for the moments that matter. They're good enough most of the time until the rubber meets the road. And when the rubber meets the road, it feels like they almost always implode on both sides.
Well, there was that breakdown on 3rd down, that 3rd and long that you mentioned deep in Jacksonville's own territory. There was another one that Terry and I watched on film post-game that really was just a huge discredit to this coaching staff. Arden Key dropping into coverage on I don't know if it was a 3rd down, but Brian Thomas is against him. Mac Jones rolls out to his left. Brian Thomas picks up his largest gain of the day for 31 yards. In what world is Arden Key supposed to be in pass coverage? That's
Apparently
what's really baffling for me. We were watching the tape. There was a 9 on the jersey, so we thought that's either Darrell Baker, that's either Jarvis Brownlee. It's neither. It's Arden Key in coverage on a critical play that turned into a Jacksonville score.
Yeah, sometimes those guys drop into coverage rather than rush because, they're playing some kind of zone scheme. But in no circumstance does Arden Key need to be covering Brian Thomas, who is a down-the-field threat and really the only one that the Jaguars had yesterday at 8 catches for 86 yards. I think, when you talk about the coaching and all, I think that this group gets another year. And I think that part of the reason Brian Callahan gets another year is because he has done some good in the one thing he was really tasked to do this year besides winning games, obviously, and that is the development of Will Levis, who has made some strides, although took a little bit of a step back yesterday. I think, though, that in 2025, I think the clock is majorly ticking on the coaching staff, the general manager, and anybody else that doesn't perform up to snuff in the eyes of Amy Adams Strunk and ownership, because I think that she and this fan base are getting tired of the losing, and not just the losing, but how they're losing.
I got some stat stuffers if you're ready.
Not many, but let's do them. I'll start with the number. Or Chris, you'll start with the number.
Let me just get these out of the way. Titans offense with Mason Rudolph. 337.3 yards on 68 plays, 20 first downs a game, 10 passing, 18.8 points. Sacks taken 1.5, time of possession 35-19. Titans offense with Will Levis in his past 5 starts, by the way, which include his 2 best. 293.8 in total yards on 59 plays, only 14 first downs, only 8.5 passing first downs, 17.8 points a game, 4.8 sacks taken, and time of possession of 28-30.
And sack number 1.5 to 4.8. Is that what it was between Rudolph and Levis?
And look, taking sacks is better than turning the ball over, but if you're playing behind the sticks, it doesn't help you anyway.
Yeah. Well, here's what's going on with that, and I think it's pretty obvious. Mason Rudolph is a veteran guy, and he sees the play is not developing, and he ditches the ball the first chance he gets. Hence, a 59 or 58% completion rate or whatever it is that he has on the year. He's getting rid of the football when he knows that the play is not going to work or he's under duress and about to get sacked. Will Levis' mindset is because he's got a big arm, because he has a penchant for going down the field trying to hit explosive plays, holds on to the ball longer, hoping that explosive play will develop rather than just chucking the ball out of bounds. And I think that is a large part of the discrepancy there, Chris, in the Mason Rudolph production and percentage in sacks versus the Will Levis sacks and production.
Well, also he does have great legs. He can extend plays with his legs, and he can make things happen with his legs. Unfortunately, he doesn't feel the pocket well enough to know where to go with his legs out of a pass play. He steps into more sacks instead of stepping away and rolling out. And once he figures that out, I think he could be okay, but I'm not sure he's going to get that time. Sorry, Blaine, your numbers.
Chris, you might get your wish here of Mason Rudolph, depending on how Will Levis's shoulder is holding up. He had to get that injection. I don't have half.
I would rather lose with Will Levis. I'm just saying Will Levis is not the quarterback for the future. And there's not a quarterback in next year's draft that's worth taking unless you are number 1 or 2. But Will Levis will get next year, and that's all he'll get.
Give my 2 stuffers here.
Go ahead.
Talking about Otis Reese, really solid performance for him defensively. The linebacker spot, Luke Gifford had a team high 11 tackles, 2 linebackers that filled in. That's the 5th and 6th starting linebackers for this team so far. Chidobe Awuzie had an interception in his return. There were some bright spots on this defense.
For sure.
Yeah, there were a few. And Chris, back to your point, I agree, that this year's quarterback class is not great. But to me, this team has way too many holes that one quarterback, unless you bring in Patrick Mahomes, is not going to be the difference.
I'm not even sure he can help.
Thanks for tuning in to the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. We'll see you next week.